Welcome to the Speak with People podcast. My name is Jason Raitz. I'll be your host, and this podcast exists to help you improve your communication skills. Whether you communicate one-on-one, to a team, from a stage, or from behind a screen, we know that when we improve our communication skills as leaders, it exponentially changes everything. It improves our relationships, it improves our leadership skills, and it improves our business skills. So let's get ready to dive into this next episode. Well, are you ready to elevate your leadership and communication presence in your workplace? Are you ready to excel in your communication? And if you did take the steps to improve and excel in your communication, would it transform your leadership? And would that transformation get the attention of your peers, your bosses, your C-suite, whoever it was? Well, the answer is so practical. It's so profound. And today we're going to talk about a lot of those workplace communications and how you can excel. Because when you do excel in that communication, your career will just skyrocket. Well, today I am beyond honored, humbled. I've been looking forward to this interview for some time, to interview a communications expert. We are talking from America to the Netherlands, which was always fun to think about communicating across the globe. He's authored quite a few books, some great ones. The First Minute, Effective Emails, 39 Ways to Make Your Training Stick, which I was just telling him off record, that book has helped transform our trainings here for Speak with People. He trains companies, leaders. He's worked with, the list of companies is just incredible, very prestigious companies. And so I am so honored to have him on the podcast. Chris, thank you so much for being on the Speak with People podcast.
Well, Jason, thank you very much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
I love it. The move to the Netherlands, my knowledge of different countries is really going to show here. But has there been much of a communication issue, or has it been pretty easy?
It has been very easy. And there have been interesting nuances that come with the culture. So one of the things about the Netherlands is everybody, or almost everybody, speaks fantastic English. So much so that it makes it very difficult to learn Dutch. Because as soon as they hear you speak with a non-Dutch accent, they'll go, oh, we'll just speak in English. It'll be easier or quicker. And as much as I would like to practice my Dutch, they're right. It is just easier and quicker if they speak in their incredibly good English. And it does make it very hard to learn the language. But you asked about sort of differences. One of the biggest differences is how direct the Dutch are. Very, very direct. If you had someone around to your house and you made dinner and it was bad, there's a decent chance they would say, please don't cook this for me again. It wasn't nice.
Wow.
And
yes.
Yeah, it can feel kind of brutal.
Yeah.
But you always know where you stand. Always.
Right.
I don't know of anybody here who talks about or sort of moans about backstabbing or inter-office politics. If someone doesn't like someone else, they say it. If someone does something that annoys them, they say it. It's incredibly refreshing once you get thick enough skin not to be affected by it.
Wow, that is interesting. And you think about all of the drama that it would take care of if we just took their example a little bit.
Oh yes, I've been party to conversations, listening into conversations where somebody has just called out another person in the group. They were sort of acquaintances, they weren't friends, and they said, "Why are you lying? Stop telling lies. It's not helping anybody." And it was very, for the non-Dutch people there was this pause and looking around. Is there going to be a fight? Is there going to be a big argument? And the other person said, okay. And they just carried on. Now, these are just small examples. So obviously you can't represent an entire country of people with just a few examples. But if you look at the stereotypes and the jokes that comedians make, even Dutch comedians as well, these are the things that are most commonly brought up. The directness is such a core part. And it's covered in Erin Mayer's fantastic book, The Culture Map, which is about understanding and communicating between different cultures. And she has a scale about the abruptness and directness. And the Dutch are there with the Russians in like really really direct. And then way on the other end are sort of the Japanese, who are far more sensitive to not being rude or abrupt. So yeah, great resource. Anyone listening to this,
Wow.
that's the first recommendation. Aaron Mayer's book, The Culture Map.
I love it. Definitely. So, for our audience, why don't you give us a little bit more of your backstory, a little bit more of your story, who you are, what you do, what got you to this place?
Sure thing. Well, hi, I'm Chris. I think we've covered that bit, and I am I help people communicate better at
Mm,
work, but I don't do the usual stuff. I don't teach public speaking or active listening. And I suspect we may talk about those things later on as well. What I do is focus on communication situations that are common at work,
mm.
asking questions, giving status updates, running meetings, talking to executives, being clear and concise. And I create and gather frameworks and formulas to help people be clear and concise, write great emails,
Wow.
deliver a good status update. And why do I do that? Well, for after 20 odd years in quite a wide range of jobs around the world, I started in engineering and ended up in healthcare. And I went via defense and telecoms and web hosting and the travel industry. And I ended up briefing executives on a regular basis,
Wow.
running merger and acquisition deals, doing joint ventures, and communicating with a lot of people every day, and not finding good resources to help me or help my team. And so, having lived in that world of needing to communicate clearly, not finding great resources, I decided to take a step and go full time into providing, creating, and teaching the things that were lacking in my career.
Wow. Wow. That's fantastic. That is fantastic. So you looked for the things that were obviously apparent with all of your experience, and you said, okay, hey, let's provide some resources and tools. That's amazing.
Yes, I look
How?
for the gaps
Yes.
because there's sort of one of the soapboxes I could stand up on for a long time is talking about we need to stop saying communication is a skill, because it's
Ooh.
not. Communication is not a skill. Just like cooking is not one skill. Cooking is a whole range of techniques
Right.
that you need to practice and master. Somebody who is the world's best pastry chef has very different skills from somebody who is the world's best Asian cuisine chef. They
Right.
use different skills and experience. Same with communication. Best negotiator might be terrible at giving a presentation.
Mm.
So communication isn't a skill. I believe it's a situation. And in any given situation, we need to draw on different techniques and use our skill level in those techniques. And
Yes.
to circuitous route to, to come back to my main point, which was what I found was there were gaps.
Mm.
So we talk about communication skills, and the poster child is public speaking. And then people would say, body language or verbal and non-verbal
Yeah.
or active listening and these sorts of things. But actually, what we do most often is write emails and need to summarize things and need to ask good questions. And the main training programs from the companies were in didn't include practical, foundational, functional stuff.
Yep.
And so I look across that broad spectrum of communication skills and I look to see where is there a gap. And then I try and fill it.
Wow. Wow. Ah, so powerful. I mean, it's so true. A couple of the bank clients I'm working with right now just was on a pre-call earlier for an event next week, and they said, our people have the technical skills they need. They know they have the wisdom for the products and the services, but they've lost those relationship skills that are so incredibly important. Some of those emotional intelligence skills, knowing how not to interrupt in a conversation, the right questions to ask, the body language, following up. It's amazing the amount of executives and leaders I talk to who just say, I just need my people to send an email after the conversation. So many of those skills that you teach could make or break someone's career if they learn how to do them well. I mean, it's just powerful.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's communication in general is it's listed in the top 5 skills for almost every job.
Mm.
And that that shows that it's important. Now, the specific skills or the specific techniques need to be clearly defined,
Yeah.
but being able to communicate is really important. I was part of 3 different rapid development programs: a graduate development program, a middle manager program, and an executive program. And I've also had the good fortune to be part of sort of witnessing multiple other graduate and middle manager development programs. And the people who excelled, the people who really went up, weren't technically any better than their peers.
Mm.
The people who consistently outpace their peers in career progression are those who can communicate effectively.
Mm.
Not super stellar. They certainly weren't all getting up on stage, and some of them I would never want to see on a stage because it would be
Yeah.
bad for everybody.
Right.
But that wasn't the skill they needed. It was being able to communicate an expert message to a non-expert audience.
Ooh.
It was being able to get their message across, regardless of the audience, their seniority, their level of expertise, their position within whatever organization that these people were working in at the time. Getting the message across was the standout thing, because when everybody is technical, how you communicate really shows people how good you are.
Mm.
I was watching a video the other day, and the name escapes me. It'll come back to me as soon as we stop recording, I'm sure. But it was a great example of how your technical skills can be up here, can be sort of 10 out of 10. But if you communicated a 3 out of 10, people are going to remember you as a 3 out of 10.
Yep.
You are only as good as the ability to communicate.
Oof. Wow. Why do you think so many leaders overlook this area? And I don't know what the percentage of so many are, but we've both worked with people who, you see them, they're talented, they're doing great work, or maybe it's the exact opposite. They're just barely getting along. But if they just would take a little effort to work on some of these skills, why do you think it's overlooked at times?
I think there are 2 reasons, and it's not just individuals, it's companies as well. And the 2 reasons are it's hard, and secondly, it's not a life-threatening problem. It's not a critical problem. Yep. So if we think about the reason companies invest in training, they invest in training when there is an arterial bleed. They're not making the sales. They're losing their customers, something that's critically affecting the business. Communication, or bad communication, is more of a weeping wound than a loss of a limb or an arterial bleed. And so it never gets to the top of the priority list. There's always something else that is, at the moment, more critical, more important. We need our sales teams to do better. We need our customer service teams to help retain our customers so we don't lose them. We need to have this big IT development program. And so our money, effort, and focus and training will go into that. Adopting AI, understanding AI, those things
right.
Get the money, the focus, the attention. And that's at a company level. When it comes to an individual level, we all make similar choices. I need to get the skills that will get me promoted. If I'm in a technical role, I actually have to spend a lot of time just trying to keep current with the technology. So a lot of my training effort in my own time goes to just maintaining my relevance. To then add communication on top, it's like, I'll get to that.
Yeah.
And the way that I've seen this show up is companies and clients come to me when they say, my boss has said, or I didn't get the promotion because I can't communicate, or they won't put me on this fast track scheme because I can't communicate. It's only when it becomes a critical barrier.
Wow. Exactly. Well, it's interesting because so often I think we take our communication for granted, like we take our breathing for granted, all day long. We breathe, and then, every once in a while we get sick and we have a respiratory infection and the whole world shuts down, right? We're like, we've got to get this, taken care of. Same thing with our communication, just what you're talking about, in that situation. I mean, that shows a fair amount of self-awareness or some emotional intelligence if that employee is going, okay, they're pointing out some areas. I want to improve these. I would say I've talked with a fair number of leaders who kind of go the opposite. I totally disagree with my boss. This is not fair. I don't know,
Yeah.
what I want to
Oh,
do. This is just a
I've
waste
come
of
to you
time.
for training because somebody told me I need it. That immediately shows me you don't think you need it. And this is coming back to the question of like, why don't people invest in communication training? It's because it's not a me problem, it's an everybody else problem.
Wow. Wow.
Communication, bad communication is a them. My meetings are never bad, but I go to lots of bad meetings. I'm never long-winded, but I could tell you 20 people who are.
Yep.
It's always a them problem, not a me problem.
Uh, oh, that's
I
so
shouldn't say
true.
always.
Yes. Oh, I had to write that down. That's you're you're killing my hand here. I like to take notes during the podcast episodes, and so I'm already a page in. So I appreciate that. That is really powerful. So when it comes to some of those specific skills that really do help us excel, give us, maybe, give us a couple of them, and it's maybe something to remember about each of those. Earlier, you mentioned things like our email correspondence, our question, some of those. If you could, kind of give
Yeah,
us a couple of those
absolutely.
gems for each of them.
If anyone's a Lord of the Rings fan, there's one ring to rule them all, and they have all the other rings with their specific abilities.
Yes.
Same with communication. There are, I believe, two things that either underpin or overarch. Pick the metaphor that works best for you. But two things that, if you can do these two things, you will stand out a mile from the people around you.
Mm.
The first is be able to summarize in a clear and concise way.
Ooh.
And the second is, no matter who you are talking to or what you are talking about, your message needs to be relevant, relatable, simple, and jargon free. And if you can do that, relevant, relatable, simple, and jargon free, if you do that, you can communicate anything to anyone.
Wow.
And that skill underpins selling. It underpins asking your boss for something. It's sharing an idea, giving stakeholder updates. Everything needs to be relevant to the other audience. They need to be able to
Wow.
relate to it. So it's got to be relatable. It has to be simple, otherwise we lose people. And as a happy consequence, if you do those three things, your message will be 80-90% jargon free anyway.
Wow.
And we often start the other way around. We go, I want to be jargon free. And when I teach this, I'm like, great, that's the goal. I won't teach you to be jargon free. I'll teach
Right.
you to be relevant, relatable, and simple. And then all the jargon falls out.
Wow. Absolutely. What do you think? Where do you think our childhood? We'll go a little deep here. Where do you think someone of our childhood education, or maybe what was modeled to us, failed us when it comes to being able to summarize something? Because it really is interesting. And I know I've been there before, but watching some leaders as they try to summarize something, and it's, paragraphs, and it's, 18
Yeah.
minutes long, and no,
Oh,
concise, get right to it.
yeah. It's after 12 minutes, they say, well, to cut a long story short, I'm like, well, I'd got the long story bit. Um, so
Yes.
where do we fail? Well, there's a couple of answers to this, and one is we could really go into the current Gen Z. I'm reading a book called The Anxious Generation
Mm.
about the impact of smartphones, but I'll put that to the side for a moment. For anyone who's not 20 or below, we were never taught how to summarize something. I
Mm.
don't remember clear and concise lessons in school or university.
Right.
The closest we get is a book report or writing an abstract for a paper if you had to write a paper.
Yep.
And we're not taught how to summarize.
Wow.
And it's such a critical skill. We all think we can do it because everything we say is a summary. Someone says, "Hey, how's your day going?" Well, I don't start with, "Well, my brain awoke from REM sleep, and I opened my left eye and my right, and I turned my head slightly before beginning to raise myself up, and I moved my left foot off the bed while reaching for..." Like, even that is a summary, because I'm not
Yep.
talking about every single detail that happened,
Yep.
although it feels like it. So we do summarize, but we're not taught how to summarize for work. And the thing that we learn socially, which is storytelling based, narrative type communication, social communication, that is very different from transactional communication at work.
Wow.
And when we're
Right.
at school, we get taught by rote. We're on receive mode, or we're answering very specific questions. And we're just not taught how to form an idea and summarize it and deliver it succinctly.
Wow. Wow. Absolutely. So what do you think holds back? I'm thinking about the employee who was on a team and, for a project, everybody's got their part in it, but there always seems to be that one team member who nobody knows what they're doing, what the update is on the piece that they're working on. They don't seem to, fill everybody else in. Why do you think there seems to be kind of that one teammate at times, and how could, other teammates help them, you know, get that information out of them so they don't have to sit
Yeah.
around and wait?
Well, if we start by looking at the opposite, which is the person who over updates and overshares on everything all the time to everybody, the amount I see you nodding and kind of wincing a little bit as I
Yeah.
say that,
Yeah.
that feeling will drive some others to go in the opposite direction.
Yes.
There's
Yep.
just so much coming from over there. I'm going to be over here doing my thing.
Yep.
And so I can't give one answer
Yeah.
because there are lots of different reasons. Some people might be lazy and trying to avoid work. Other people might be diligently doing their thing, doing an amazing job, and just not feeling the need to shout about it and express it.
Right.
And then there's a range in between. But whatever the reason, whatever that internal drive for, I'm just not sharing for whatever reason it happens to be, what the rest of the team can do is ask for appropriate amounts of relevant information.
Mm.
And it starts by not asking one of the most horrible questions we can ask someone, which is, so how's it going with that piece of work?
Right.
Like, what what does that mean?
Right.
How's it going? Well, I sit down at my desk and I type and I'm working on these files, and there's, what do you actually want to know?
Yeah.
So the rest of the team needs to ask good questions.
Yeah.
And that means getting specific. So is there any reason we won't meet the deadline for your piece of the work? Is there anything you need from us? Or is there anything we can help you with? What can I tell this stakeholder about the status of your work in relation to time, budget, quality, etc.?
Yeah.
Ask good questions to get the information you need from the other person. And once you get that, the second step is to say, great, could we every couple of days just get a couple of statements from you with that kind of an update?
Yeah.
So find what you need first, make sure you're asking the right questions, and then use those questions as the model or the template for future updates.
Wow. That's so good. Let's go back for a second, because you hit on something earlier that we talk a lot about on this podcast, because I think it's so fascinating. But as we look at Gen Z, this generation who seemingly, they don't have to wait, right? They can get an answer in a second on their device. They're used to, and I was reading some research on Gen Z and texting, and how they want a response. My age group, a couple generations above, might need to think about the response and process the response. Gen Z are like, I need the response. So what do you think, for the future for Gen Zers, as you look at it, as you study communication, how is it impacting, their communication and their dynamics? And then two, I mean, they're obviously flooding the workplace. Generation Alpha, the one below them, will be coming up and will be bigger than all of them in a few years. kind of put on your futuristic goggles for a second, and specifically as it comes to communication, and what do you see ahead for that generation and then the other ones working with them?
Yeah, unfortunately, I see a lot of problems, and a significant gap between
Yep.
those who can and those who can't.
Mm,
So over the last hundreds of years, people who can communicate versus those who can't communicate, the gap has been fairly narrow. Now we're getting larger and larger gaps. And to get really specific on that, things like being able to read people's facial responses and interpret them correctly.
right.
I mentioned a book earlier called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, Haidt. Hopefully I've pronounced his name correctly. And it's about the impact, or he puts forth a theory, and he starts by saying, this could be wrong. So he's very open about that, it could be wrong, but he then lays out an incredible amount of evidence that children who have grown up with full internet access smartphones have lost a significant part of the development of their communication skills in their brain, the literal
Wow.
brain development in how we interact socially, in how we read social cues, how we understand and respond to that back and forth, being right and wrong, upsetting someone and forgiving. And the change in communication from play-based childhood, where we were in a social group
Yep.
and you had to work hard to be in that group. If
Yeah.
you messed up and the group shunned you, that was incredibly painful.
Mm,
And if you wanted to be part of a group, you had to earn your place over time. And you spent hours with people every day finding your way.
yep.
And those develop not just, it sounds very, very nice to think about that wistful childhood we may or may not have had, depending on our generation, but there are actual brain chemistry and brain structure developments that occur in that period. And by moving to smartphones, particularly with social media, the ability to become in with a group is clicking a button.
Yes.
I could be accepted into however many Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, pick your platform. I
Yep.
could be accepted into a group in a second and I'm in the group. I don't have to work for it. I could even make up some answers and tick a couple of boxes, truthfully or not.
Yep.
So there's no effort. And if I don't like what's there, I can just leave and there's no consequence. And the challenge that we're facing now is the interactions are here on our screens. They're not literally face to face. And when we can't read social cues, we can't work together very effectively. I'm not going to name names, but I was in a conversation with someone recently who was talking about new colleagues, new interns they had in their work. And the interns had absolutely no ability to read the annoyance on the face of the people around them. And it was a group of interns, and none of them picked up on the fact that somebody was really annoyed because
Wow.
and in the conversations with them afterwards, even pointing out, in fact, did you not see them scowling? What's
Right.
a scowl? Like, and it was so surreal. It felt
Yep.
like this being filmed because it'll end up on TikTok. But
Right.
and I'm sure this is just one example. And of course, there are people who can do this. And yes, kids know what scowls are, sort of in general. But you and I grew up with face-to-face interactions.
Yep.
You had to pay attention. If you pissed someone off,
Yep.
you needed to be able to know so you could adjust your behavior and stay in the group. And now that doesn't happen. The thousands of hours that we spent practicing, failing, painfully learning
Right.
those lessons are now at best hundreds of hours over the same time frame, and it can be measured in some cases in tens, because groups of kids sit together on their phones. They're not
Right.
playing with each other,
Right.
trying to persuade each other which game they should play, where we should go, what's a good or a bad idea. None of that art of persuasion, influence, understanding, empathy, all those things we have to practice. And I realize I'm really going on now.
No, it's good.
Get the book, read into it. But we're not practicing those things.
Right.
And we're not providing opportunities to practice those. And we're
Wow.
definitely not teaching them in schools.
Wow. I was with a group last week. I was on a speaking engagement, and was getting to know the event manager, and they have children, and they have waited till their kids turn 18 before, no, 16 to get a phone, 18 to get social media. And I thought, wow. I mean, that is, it's definitely going against uh, the
Oh
culture
yeah.
on that one. And they're a little worried, they're like, oh, I hope, I hope our kids will be able to adapt, because, everybody's on the device all the time. But, you know, I also think just exactly what you said. They are probably going to have a leg up on being able to read those things going on, their emotional intelligence, their self-awareness, maybe their relational awareness. It is interesting. It's fascinating to think, 30 years ago, you know, someday there'll be this invention where people will spend 8 hours of their time on.
Yeah. And it's not just the time on it. A lot
Right.
of the studies show that people are thinking about their social media
Yeah.
when they're not on it.
Right.
And
Right.
for in the average in a number of samples of teenage girls between 13 and 17 in the US, they were getting on average one notification a minute for their entire waking day.
Wow.
So context shifting, constant interruption, being on their mind the whole time. But we're really digressing. I'd like to come back to the example.
Yeah.
You said you were talking to someone who'd gone to so their kids didn't get a phone till 16, no social media to 18. I have a 7-year-old, and we are thinking of doing the
Mm.
same thing.
Yep.
And the fear I have is the social exclusion of,
Yeah.
oh, you're the weirdo without a phone.
Right.
Did they talk about that at all?
They did. They did. And they talked about how it got, around the 11, 12, 13 is when it really got the hardest because, they'd go to different parties. They were the only one without a phone. They were, they couldn't reach them. There's a couple times when the kids, it used to be 18 to the phone, and then they moved it to 16 because the kids got done, with band earlier, and they had to sit there for 2 hours because they couldn't get a hold of anybody. And so
Yeah.
they said the one of their kids struggled the most with not having social media because always feeling left out. They're like, we didn't know what anybody else was, talking about. With our kids, we probably went too young. My thought was, well, it's not going anywhere. They're going to have to learn how to adapt. And
Yeah.
so our kids, I think they were 13 or 14, and we allowed the phone, we allowed the social media, and we didn't make a giant deal about it. We, and for any of them, they haven't got, too sucked in or anything, catalytic, I'm pronouncing that word wrong, but nothing has, blown up in our faces over it. But, we're always as a family talking about that little notification that comes up. For us, it's Sunday morning. This is how much time you averaged, on a day. So
Yeah.
what time are we averaging with solitude? What time are we averaging with reading? What time are we averaging with face-to-face
Yep.
conversations? Having some of those conversations, because, especially with some of the training I do, we're sitting with clients and technology rules our life, right? We put our phone right next to us. Oh,
On the table.
hold on a second. And then their watch goes off, and then they hit their watch, like you just talked about the notifications with the teenage girls. It's with adults as well. They're always, oh, hold on, I got to take, it's like, no, just, can you give me your time for a second?
Yeah. And that is one of the things that when we communicate at work. So it's bringing it back to pure
Yeah,
communication
I
for a
love
moment. When we
it.
communicate at work, we are now battling against those things as well.
Yep.
Not just, not only do we have to be clear, be concise, be convincing, all the other C words that come with communication, we also need to be more interesting than the little drug in someone's pocket or watch
Mm,
or wherever it happens to
yes.
be. And that is hard. So we're at a disadvantage. It was hard anyway, and
Yes.
now it's even harder. When we talk
Yep.
about parents and their kids and what they do, I really enjoy watching what other communications experts, advisors, and trainers do. And there's a pattern that I've seen, which is everybody I know who has kids, teen or younger, actually between 6 and 18, and teaches communication, whether that's public speaking, whether that's good presentation skills, whether it's tone of voice. There are some very specific communication trainers out there. They are all getting their kids involved in what they do. Richard McCann had his son, who was, I think, 6 or 7, introduce him on a stage to 500 people. And his son was all dolled up. Of course, it was very cute, and there was the R factor in there as well.
Yep.
But Richard McCann helps his son develop these skills by making it part of their life from a young age.
Yep.
There's a chap who teaches English in Spain. And again, I'm really blanking on names today. I'm sorry, I'm not doing a great job with names. And his daughters are videos with him. And he's teaching them and exposing them to different styles of communication, being comfortable on video, but in an informative, educational, valuable way, not just a dancing or making people laugh, which has its value as well.
Yeah.
But not just the standard scrolling, trying to get likes, but actually delivering value. And this is consistently what people are doing. And I plan to do it with my daughter. Yep. She's already interested. She's a little young at the moment, and we're trying to keep her off social media. There aren't videos and pictures of her online. But getting her to communicate, giving short presentations, helping her know how to summarize her wacky idea, and be able to convince us that we should go to the zoo instead of going swimming or whatever it is, finding ways to build that in regularly every week, not every day if you can do it in a fun way. And so we're sort of taking ownership of that where it's missing in society and education.
I love that. I love it. Quick parenting thing. We've talked about this before on the podcast, but I can remember when our kids were older now, 24 all the way down to 10, a bunch in the middle. So we have five kids there, but,
oh, wow.
Yeah, it's full. But I can remember when they're toddlers, your kids' age, preteens, if we'd be in a restaurant and, our son or daughter went to order and they didn't look at the waiter or waitress, we would start the process over. Okay, hey, when we talk to people, we look them in the eye. We just kind of took some of those moments, to make them teachable. And sorry for the brag session. We've had countless parents, teachers, their bosses tell us time and time again, they're good at communicating. So especially as parents, it's so important to take some of those moments.
That's not a brag. That's great. That's good. And we should talk about it. If you were pushing other people out of the way and going, I'm better at this than you,
right?
That's the brag,
right?
But you've given some great examples. You didn't tell them off. You didn't speak for them. You said, okay, let's start this again. When you talk to someone, you look at them, and if you're trying to read, you say, okay, I would like this. And then you use those teachable, repetitive moments. Do exactly the same thing with our daughter. Right? You have to speak loud enough for them to hear.
Right.
Don't talk to me. I'm not the one bringing you your food.
Yep.
Please talk to Steve, Dave, Sheila, whoever it happens to be. So get the names as well. And that is so important.
Yeah.
And you've also said something we talked about earlier. Their bosses, the people around them, are noticing they're good communicators just by doing the basics. They're already standing out, just doing the fundamentals of being polite and looking people in the eye.
It's incredible. Do you think maybe it's not a generational thing at all, but with more and more time employees are spending on their devices, do you think it lessens their ability to have the more difficult conversations that they need to either have with team members or, with their boss? Does the device and the time give them this escape so they're just kind of avoiding it? Or is it just we avoid it anyways because those difficult conversations are hard?
Oh, both. We avoid, no one likes conflict. Our danger response is it fight, flight, or freeze. One of those is going to come in. And that's how we emotionally respond to something.
Yep.
Someone gives you bad news, you're going to disagree with it and fight back, or you're going to completely ignore it, or you're just sort of going to shut down and Okay, what's happening? So
Right.
fight, flight, and freeze is a very human emotional response. And having difficult conversations is something that we learn about and practice as kids. You tease someone in a group and then the group shuns you.
Yep.
You learn the pain of that. Or if
Yeah.
you do something the group doesn't like and they're going to kick you out, that's the receiving end of a difficult conversation.
Oh,
And
it's so good.
we don't practice it as kids. We don't
Yeah.
practice it in social groups, and it's difficult. And then we get to work and wonder why we can't deliver, feedback or bad news.
Yep.
Promote someone into a managerial position and go, oh well, yes, now you must deliver performance reviews. What a brutal thing to do to someone.
Right.
Totally unprepared. Now
Right.
you must go and tell your team they're all terrible.
Yep.
Oh, like what?
That's
We
right.
set up managers for failure.
Ah, that's so good. Well, I feel like we could do episode 2 very easily because there's about 15 more questions I'd love to ask you. But you have just provided so much wisdom. I know this is going to help a ton of our listeners. Before I let you go, let me ask you a couple rapid fire questions because we're trying to build this database where our listeners can go and get the best resources from each of our guests. If there is a speaker that you just absolutely love, they fill your bucket, they challenge you time and time again, and you find yourself recommending the speaker, who would that be?
I actually don't have anyone that I would really go to.
Okay.
I enjoy listening to anyone that has a relevant message
Mm,
that is delivered in a relatable and simple way that speaks to something that is important to me or convinces me of
yeah.
something that is important that I wasn't aware of before. And it could be anyone, but there's nobody who I would have the poster on my wall
Yeah.
of this is a great speaker. It can be absolutely anyone.
Yeah. I love that. Is there a podcast that you keep going back to, whether guilty pleasure or leadership development, that, again, you find yourself, oof, that they marked all the boxes and I gotta forward this one on.
Yes, the Hidden Brain by the
Mm,
Guardian newspaper is a podcast, huge range of topics, and they take the complex and make it simple. They take things that you might not realize have any value in our lives and show the relevance and the impact.
wow.
And it's very, very well put together. And it's not current affairs. It's it's sort of world knowledge
Yeah.
and helping provide inputs outside of the usual echo chambers.
Wow. I love that. And then lastly, is there a book? I mean, you've given us a couple of great ones. I'm going to make sure I put those in the show notes. But is there one book that you would say, hey, if you were, I mean, the whole desert, you're trapped on a desert island, you got one book, it's going to be the most important book you read. Is there one that you can, or two, you can
Well,
give us?
of course, The First Minute by Chris Fenning. I mean, cheeky self promotion there.
Love
But
it.
if there's one book that is that's good for everyone in a career, and it's this one. It's So Smart But by Alan N. Weiner, and it is a fantastic book for people who want to become leaders. And if I'll show you the edge of it again for those looking at the video, I've put in a lot of
Oh,
marks. There's a lot of post-it notes on there. For anyone aspiring to be a leader, it's so smart, so capable in your job, but unable to think strategically, unable to present in a way that makes sense to that audience, unable to X, Y, and Z. Really good resource for people aspiring to be an executive and a
mm,
leader. Also, a great resource for people who are leaders and are trying to find a way to help their team. Like, you're so good, but I can't promote you because of X. This book has very practical advice, very practical methods, great examples. And Alan is a great guy as well. So that's always nice to know that the author is a
yes.
good person behind it. But that as a business book, it doesn't come up often as a recommendation, but that it's really a very, very good book.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Absolutely. Well, and I need to apologize to you. Normally I have our podcast guest books right in front of me so I can show the audience, but in my home office on their side of the room, I have been through one of your other books, 39 Ways to Make Training Stick, and it looks like the book you just showed us because you have so many incredible ideas in there. It's literally revolutionizing, changing the training that we do as Speak With People. So I can't thank you enough for that. And we'll make sure we put the rest of your books, we'll put them in our Speak With People Facebook community group. and recommend them to our leaders as well. Where's the best place we can send people to find out more about you online and get more of your information?
Absolutely. So my social hangout is on LinkedIn, so come and find me there. My website is chrisfenning.com. There's all the info about what I do, what I offer. And if you're interested in my books, they're not only on my site, but wherever you like to buy books.
I love it. And the freebie you have, I can't remember what exactly it's called right off the top of my head, right on your website. It is a killer resource for leaders.
It is. People keep telling me I should stop giving it away for free, and it's a $30 book. If you bought the print version, it's $30, and it is the workbook that goes with my bestseller, The First Minute.
Goodness.
It is, and it's not just an empty book full of lines for you to fill in. It is a practical guide to help you prepare to have difficult conversations, to summarize something effectively, to self-assess how clear and concise are you. And it's very, very simple methods, but the key to all of communication, it's not about finding the most sexy, fantastic, hard way to do something. It's about finding the simplest way and then repeating that and practicing and practicing and practicing. So if you come to my site in exchange for an email address, which I'll send a newsletter once every 2 weeks. It's not 400 emails a day. That workbook, you get the PDF version, and it will guide you through and help you prepare for all sorts of communication situations that you'll have at work.
Oh, goodness. Well, thank you for your generosity and your wisdom. We'll make sure we tag all of that in the show notes and in the Facebook group. And Chris, I just can't thank you enough for your time. This has been just absolutely incredible. So appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Jason. It's been a pleasure. We've talked about so much.
I know. This is one of those great conversations where I think it really will help leaders on a whole lot of ways. So appreciate it.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us on another episode of the Speak with People podcast. We hope that you were encouraged. We hope that you were inspired and challenged to improve your communication skills. I want to thank you again for being a part of the Speak with People podcast community. Make sure you don't miss out on being a part of the Speak with People Facebook community group. Just head to Facebook, type in Speak with People, scroll down and join our community, because every single day we're encouraging each other. We're helping each other to improve our communication skills. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next episode.